To continue the sentiments that Doc talked about, solar car is really a co-opetition, I call it, right? This picture right here was my team. There is such an incredible story behind that. I almost started crying sitting back there about what we had to go through to get to that. That particular day was the first time in our history, which at that point had been about 12 years, that we actually finished a complete stage before time was over. That was big. And they said, well, what do we do now? And one of the guys says, let's go to Whataburger. So that's how that happened. In the vein of co-opetition, the very first time I ever took a team to the Speedway, we're from this area, right? So I got kids live all around here. First time we showed up at the Speedway, our car was absolutely horrendous, right? Into scrutineering, we had about 2 hours left, and we finally just looked at each other and said, we're done. I walked up to the front of the pit, talked to Dr. Marks, said, Dr. Marks, it's just not going to happen. I don't have enough kids to get this done. The car's in a state, it's just not going to happen. We're going to have to beg out this year. I turned around, started walking back to the pit. By the time I got to my car, there were two teams working on my car. One team fixed the brakes, one team fixed the battery, and our car was drivable in about 20 minutes. That just does not happen in a lot of other events. Okay, so please take that in consideration and know that whatever you might ever come across, there is somebody here to help. Okay? How do you build a team? Well, very first thing that has to happen is you got to have belief in your administration, right? You got to have approval from the top down. If you're trying to build this thing from the bottom up, you are going to get knocked down over and over again. So it starts out by convincing those powers that be that you've got an idea, it's functional, you can make it work, right? Next question, where do you get money, right? Every school district, every school, I taught at a private Christian school, had a whole nother set of issues. You got to know your situation. And where are you going to be able to come up with money to fund this incredible idea that you have? I can tell you, can you start for $10,000? Of course you can. Can you compete for $10,000? Probably not, right? So you have to understand what it takes to build a car. You have to understand what it takes to get to the race. I've talked to folks here in the last couple of days. It can cost you a significant amount of money just to get your team to the Speedway, right? So you got to figure out how to take that into account. Next thing you got to decide, are you the only advisor? Are you going to have help as an advisor? Do you have 2 or 3 that are bought in and absolutely a part of the team? That has a huge bearing on how much effort it's going to take. How much can you count on your kids to do? I learned a long time ago, expense has absolutely nothing to do with winning, right? You can spend a lot of money and not have a very good team and not do very well. These guys down here in the bottom left, some of you old timers will remember the Shine Runners. They found that car in a junkyard for free. They hauled it home, they tore it apart, they cut pieces, so on and so forth. A lot of it was donated. They had one electronics company donated some stuff. I don't think that car won, but it did pretty well. For $5,000, they did that first year. Okay? That second car is the car I took to Australia. We made a lot of really bad decisions, but we ran that on a 120-volt system. That was a pretty expensive car. Tried to get it to Australia and back. Our goal, we didn't want to win, we just wanted to cross the finish line. We crossed the finish line. That was huge. 2016, the very next year, one of the best cars we ever had. All those decisions we made, that car was really not very expensive because we already had all of the parts, right? Those guys on the right, Team Nuon, They're a Dutch team. Just the solar array was $100,000. Right? I think they ultimately ended up telling us that the whole car was about $250,000. Right? So you can do this for a wide spectrum of money. Don't let money be your limiting factor. Right? Where are you going to find kids? We are all intimately familiar with our schools, hopefully, right? Hopefully you've been there long enough, you developed relationships with the art teachers, the English teachers, right? History and so forth. Kids, like the ones we see sitting in here, bubble to the top, right? We should be able to figure out who they are. Whether you play football, whether you're, a drama student, whether you're in the band, it becomes very obvious that you have the capability of being on this team. I taught a robotics program for years, fell into this idea. My son got into Rubik's Cubes. He was really good at it. One day he had left one of his cubes in my classroom, and through the course of the day, it fascinated me at how many kids would walk into my classroom, pick up the cube. They either did it or they picked it up, tried to do it, and then there were those who looked at it and just walked away. Well, I went out and bought a couple more cubes, let them sit there, and over the course of a week, it became obvious to me those that were interested in the cube had something. They had a 3D spatial ability. They could see things. The kids who played with the cube were the ones in my class that did incredible projects, the ones that were almost always higher achievers in other classes as well. Well, there's no research study on that. Might do that someday. But find the kids that are not afraid to try stuff, right? I will tell you, the kids on my team that excelled the most had one incredible quality. They were not afraid to fail. They were going to try it. If it didn't work, they'll fix it and try it again. But they weren't afraid to cut that one wire because they didn't know what was going to happen, right? Mechanical. Today, 3D CAD software is huge. You've got to be able to put together some mechanical drawings. You've got to be able to understand how things work together as a unit. Those mechanical types, of course, you're going to find them in math, you're going to find them in physics. I will tell you, over the years, I had a couple of kids in art that actually got mechanics pretty well. Electrical types. Electrical engineers are a different breed. If you've ever been to a university, electrical engineers have their own personality type. Right? When you're working with electricity, they're interesting. But that's a skill your team cannot live without, right? You've got to find at least one kid who's got that gene, right? Who understands what it takes. I've had numerous kids over the years. Like Doc said, somebody's got to be able to stand up in front of the boardroom and ask for money, right? Somebody's got to understand, no, we need to talk to the CFO, not the CIO, right? Publicity, event planning. I've had numerous kids that had nothing to do with the car, but yet they still wanted to be on our team, right? You need those individuals. Be inclusive. Kids don't always want to be taught, right? They don't want somebody leaning over their shoulder pointing them how to do things. But if their friend shows them this is how to do it, they pick it up really well, right? So there is absolute value in your seniors teaching the juniors, right? Don't be afraid to let your kids teach each other. I told you I taught at a private Christian school. Time was the single hardest thing I had to overcome, right? Kids do not want to miss dual credit calculus, right? They do not want to miss their senior English class. If there is an event, something else going on, it was really hard for me to figure out how to work with those time constraints. But every school is going to have your own issues, and I'm sure you know what those are. Yes, overcommitted students. At my school, every kid was overcommitted. It was small. If you were an athlete, you played every sport, not just one. You were probably playing multiple sports. Band kids were very commonly in the play. They were very commonly art students as well. Well, you need to find a kid who's not only committed to solar car, but it's a priority for them, right? Just because they're in band and they're going to play football and they're going to do this too, does not mean they're going to be an active member on your solar car team, right? I've had a lot of kids over the year who simply wanted to come to work days so they could put it on their resume, right? They're really not an active part of the team. They're really not helpful. And in some cases, they more of a hindrance than a help. Watch out for those. Okay, I have more than one occasion asked a student not to come back. Be this guy. Every school's got a hallway, a commons, a lunchroom, whatever you want to call it. For years and years, I would sit in the hall in the morning, drinking my coffee, watching kids come and go. That was my time, one, to talk to my team, right? I would see them going to class. I'd see them coming and going. I would also see who were their friends that I could recruit for the team, right? Who was coming and going with them. Early in my teaching, I had a classroom down the hallway. I just stood out in front of the hall, in front of my classroom. Later on, they moved me out into the portables out on the other side of campus. I had to make a concerted effort to do this, right? I had to walk the other side of campus to get to a point where all the kids were regularly. Once you found kids, how do you figure out who's who? There are some teams that just talk to one, they do a test, right? Some teams that are large enough have the ability to charge a membership fee is a bad word, but it proves their financial commitment to the team. When you have kids that are financially bought in, they're a real part of your team, right? Some of us, I didn't have that luxury, right? Now, I was really lucky. I went to a school with an incredible parent group. I had a lot of parents that were bought in. But do you have enough students who want to be on your team that you need to cut it down? Well, how do you do that? There's any number of ways to identify the students that are most committed. Even just this morning, I heard about a point system. That's an incredible way to do it. Once you've established your first team, taking attendance is huge, right? Identifying who actually shows up for your work days. How many does it take? 8 to 15, in my opinion, over the years I've seen is pretty much an optimal number, right? You've got enough kids that know the car, that work the car, that are active and engaged, an engaged part of the program. Many years ago, we had a team here that had 21 kids in the pits. That was crazy. That's just a lot of people, right? Sometimes you have the ability to organize them, have them active, keep them going. That's awesome. Sometimes that's just not the case. 2019, I did the race with 5 guys. Not advisable at all. I will tell you, I thought long and hard about whether we wanted to do that, but these were the right 5 guys. We made it work. We did it. We were competitive, and it was a great time. It was also my last race. Those 5 guys were seniors, and I did not really have anybody coming up after them. I also knew at that point that my wife had gotten a job in Waco, and I was leaving. So I was not actively searching for more. Sadly, when I told school I was headed out, my program ended. Nobody at my school was willing to put in the kind of time that's necessary to run a solar car program. Once your team starts taking shape, the rest of this workshop is based on where do you go from here, right? You've got kids. The very next question is, where do we work, right? You know you're going to build a car. You know you're going to need tools. You know you're going to have all this stuff we're about to talk about, but you need a space, right? The very first year I ever bought a car, or excuse me, built a car, my school gave me a classroom. Okay, well, that's kind of cool. But we built a car inside a room with no way to get it out of the building, right? Well, we knew that very early on, right? And maintenance kept telling us they were going to build us a door and da-da-da-da-da. The car had wheels and a rolling chassis before we had a door. So keep that in mind, right? You need a space. Every school's got a different set of circumstances. I will be here all day. Please feel free to come by, ask questions. I have learned a lot of things the hard way, right? I had some really incredible mentors from other advisors, and I now teach exercise physiology and anatomy at Baylor, which is an entirely different skill set, but this is in my genes. I will tell you, I'm a solar car guy for life. Interestingly enough, I still come up with ideas and call friends, hey, you should try this kind of stuff. Any questions I can answer?
I'd like to add one thing, if you don't mind.
Certainly.
You were talking about the number of people on a team and trying to keep track of who's there and whatever. One of the things, particularly with new teams, is trying to get commitment, as you said, from the school, but also from the kids and their families. So my recommendation, at the beginning of each school year or each semester, have a meeting at night, have the kids there, bring in your administration, bring in the parents, so that everybody's on the same page. Make sure your parents are supportive, so that when you have the program in the summer where you race it, you don't find the parents say, oh, well, I'm taking the kids to Cancun and they're going to miss the race. You don't want that to happen. You don't want to disappoint a student after they put all that time in there. So get the parents on your side. And then when you are meeting, maybe those parents will bring hamburgers or hot dogs or pizza up to you and help keep things going. So setting up a parent booster club is great. That also establishes, as Dr. Dragoo was talking about, people have bought into the program. So I encourage that for you and your team. Dr. Giddy,
Yeah.
Can we give you a round of applause?
Thank you. You brought up a great point, and I was talking with somebody last night. Every team needs a team mom, right? Every team. And I can't tell you how invaluable they are, right? Somebody who's willing to go get lunch, somebody who's willing to make sandwiches when you're on the road, somebody who's willing to do that off the track stuff that has nothing to do with the car, but it's got to get done, right? That's another team member I should have put up there. But thank you all very much.